But I want the American people to understand how this effort will be different from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It will not involve American combat troops fighting on foreign soil. This counterterrorism campaign will be waged through a steady, relentless effort to take out ISIL wherever they exist using our air power and our support for partners' forces on the ground.
Welcome to the Journal Editorial Report. I'm Paul Gigot. That was President Obama Wednesday laying out his plan for taking on the Islamic State. In a primetime address, the president vowed to degrade and ultimately destroy the terror group through a coalition-led air campaign and support from Iraqi, Kurdish, and Syrian opposition forces on the ground. It's an effort the administration acknowledges could take years. So is it the right approach? And can the president be trusted to follow through? Let's ask Wall Street Journal columnist and deputy editor Dan Henninger and foreign affairs columnist Bret Stephens. So, Bret, you've been urging the United States to act against ISIS for a long time. Now that the president finally has, pick out the good things first about his approach. What do you like about the strategy?
Well, look, air power can be very effective, especially against an enemy that has decided to get itself into Humvees and tanks and armored equipment, which can be picked off from the air. It's no longer a guerrilla movement. It's much more of a conventional force.
You can stop their freedom of movement.
Absolutely. And we can have effective proxies, particularly in the Kurdish Peshmerga, if we give them the kind of military support that we need. And I think that's absolutely right.
Do you have doubts about the Iraqi military forces as proxies?
Well, look, there are good questions to doubt. Certainly the efficacy of the Iraqis, although somewhat less so now that they have their backs to the wall and they really have to fight. And it's good finally to see the president adopt a strategy of supporting a moderate Syrian opposition, which, just a few weeks ago he was telling us was a fantasy could ever even emerge. So at least there's that effort. However, the idea of no ground troops is
we'll get to
idea.
that. Well, but the Syria point seems to me to be a crucial one because he, as the president said, you have to deny the Islamic State a safe haven. And the fact that he's doing that, I think, increases the chances of success here considerably.
Yeah, I think that's an important development. I mean, previously, the U.S. involvement was limited to humanitarian assistance and protecting U.S. assets and individuals up near Erbil. Clearly, the Pentagon was straining under those restraints. He has essentially green-lighted our military planners in this area so that they're going to expand their targets. For instance, they ought to be able to carry out drone strikes against Islamic State's leaders, and these guys are not hiding out in the mountains of Waziristan. They're a little bit more exposed than they are in Pakistan. And the fact that he is going into Syria suggests that at least the front has been expanded there. And I think that gives us an opportunity to start hitting targets in Syria that will degrade Islamic State.
What about this issue of the ground troops? Because the president was at pains to say no combat troops. But number one, I don't think that's really accurate because special forces are going to be there, at least training and probably over time carrying out kill missions, or at least we're going to have to do that if we want to succeed, because that's how we defeated the al-Qaeda in Iraq during the surge in 2007.
That's right. And by the way, when you say no ground troops, you're putting a lot of innocent civilian life at risk, because ultimately no airstrikes are going to be precision strikes, particularly when we're going to have to go after Islamic State leaders in major population centers like Raqqa in Syria or Mosul in northern Iraq. So I'm afraid that the president is once again putting down a marker which he's going to be very hard put to maintain, while at the same time pursuing a goal of the ultimate destruction of ISIS.
But okay, with all of that, is this fight winnable?
Well, I think it may be. Well, it depends on what you mean by the fight. If you're talking about just ISIL in Iraq,
can he degrade and destroy ISIS? That's his goal that he set out.
With the strategy he articulated, I do not think he can. I think it is the first step in a strategy that could develop. I don't see how you can limit our commitment to 475 trainers. It inevitably is going to have to get bigger than that. The problem with that is you start to raise recollections of Vietnam, gradual escalation. The question is this president committed enough to do what he needs to do to hit ISIS both in northern Iraq and Syria?
And that's the question also for American allies. I mean, you're already beginning to see a lot of the supposedly core members of the coalition carve out exceptions, that the Germans won't use combat forces, the Turkish aren't allowing us to use Incirlik they're not to use Incirlik Air Base to go after. Why? Because there are these persistent doubts about the quality of American leadership and the sincerity of the president's commitment. And I think we are better served having a short and effective war that uses a larger number of ground forces heavier duty airstrikes rather than an endless twilight struggle that goes on 3-4 years past the Obama's presidency and leads it to a successor.
I want to take up this question of Syria because that seems to be the hardest strategic issue here, because there's a lot of people who say, look, if we go after ISIS in Syria and we degrade them, that will help Bashar Assad's regime and his Iranian supporters. How do you go after ISIS in Syria without assisting Assad?
Well, in fact, ISIS and Assad are in a kind of partnership, and there is a reason why the Assad regime helped ISIS sell oil. It is in the Assad regime's interest to make this a fight between the regime and ISIS, because it tells groups like Syrian Christians, look, either you're going to be with us or you're going to be slaughtered. So, in fact, striking ISIS creates the kind of space within the opposition for the Free Syrian Army to
But that means that training the rebels is crucial here, the moderate rebels, the non-radical, the non-jihadists. But we haven't done that for 3 years. We don't know if that's going to work.
It's a chance for him to do what he should have done a long time ago, hit Bashar Assad's airfields. Go back to the red line and complete that job. That will degrade Assad in Iraq.
You agree with that?
Yeah, well, look, it's absolutely essential. And Assad remains our enemy. This is a guy who's killed 200,000 people, gassed people to death. He's Iran's best friend. We shouldn't let him survive.
And is still gassing them.
All right. When we come back.